Hey, good morning to everybody. Happy Thursday. It's Daryl here. It is bright and freaking early, man. It's 3 a.m. here in Connecticut on the East Coast. Okay, I'm not a football fan. I don't know much about the Texas Longhorns. This is a story about a defensive lineman who just ran into some trouble. He made a mistake. He was arrested for DWI. I'll fill you in on the story in a second. And it reminded me of mistakes I've made. And to be honest with you guys, I'm 58 years old now, and it reminded me how tough it was. I think at my age, and some of you watching this are probably, most of you, when I look at my analytics, most of you watching this are in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, and you probably have kids. And I see friction between these generations, like Generation X and the younger Gen Z and millennials. The younger guys now are angry and angry that they don't have a future. They're angry at just at everything. And older people like us, Gen X, say, "Oh, you had it so easy back when we were younger." And I think we're both right. I forget how much pressure there was really back when we were younger. How making just one mistake could really change your whole future. All right, let me fill you in. The story down below. T'Vondre Sweat. I believe it's pronounced Sweet. T'Vondre Sweat, Sweat. He's a defensive lineman for the Texas Longhorns. And he's looking at being a second round draft choice. He's got possibly had a bright future in the NFL. I believe the Arizona Cardinals were looking at him for a first or second day draft choice. I don't know a whole lot about this. Like I said, I'm not a sports fan or anything, but I got the idea here. And here's what happened. He was just arrested for DWI. Now, the way the story goes is it was like 4:30 in the morning, and a 2020 blue Dodge sports car came up behind him in his 2023 orange Bronco and hit him from behind. Now, see, that's where I started to wonder, because he was hit from behind. So why did he get arrested? But then his truck flipped over, and the police noticed that he smelled of burnt marijuana and had glassy eyes. But at that point, I was still like, what about the other guy that hit him from behind? Then I read, I go through a different story. I look into these stories deeper. I don't just look at one story. Like, I look at different links down below to get different views of this. And he did admit to having like 3 shots, that's what all people say when they're asked by the police if they get pulled over, how many drinks did you have? Oh, a couple, 2 or 3, when actually it's more like 10 or 12 or 15 and they can't even remember. That's what I used to say. And he admitted to having 2 or 3 shots of tequila. So more than likely he was intoxicated. But, I still was looking at this like, he seemed like he's the one that got prosecuted to the fullest on this. I don't know what happened to the drivers of the blue car, but that's not what this video is about anyway. So he was arrested. And now it looks like his future is really in question. He was looking at a bright future with the NFL, making millions of dollars. I mean, right within his grasp of, working. I guess this guy is 6'4" and 360 pounds. Like I said, a defensive lineman, big guy. And he had a bright future with the NFL, and now that's all up in question. The Arizona Cardinals. I'll have the link to the actual cards. The Cardinals link down below, and they're iffy now on this guy. I think he went for an interview with the Texas Titans down below too, but everybody is kind of having second thoughts. And his future. This one night, this one mistake could alter his entire life, and there's a link down below where he's coming out of the courthouse, and I believe it's his attorney with him, and they look upset, they're worried, and the attorney says, we don't have any comment, of course, and I feel for this guy, and I remember how much pressure we were under back then, right? How much pressure young people are under with your whole future ahead of you, like now, if I made a mistake, it would suck, but it probably wouldn't alter my life that much. But when you make a mistake back then, it could alter your entire life. And mine did. Mine was altered. Looking back, I look at how my life changed. Okay, this is a story. I did pretty good in high school, even though I was already using by then and smoking marijuana. I never failed a class. I did good in school. I got accepted for chemical engineering at Hartford State Tech, but I passed that up. And I went to a technical school called Porter and Chester, which is kind of back then it had a very good reputation. And it was like a business school where you learn architecture and drafting in a very compressed time period. It's like a job. There was no time off. It was 18 months of solid schooling. Lectures and projects, and it was like going as they told us. There was no radios. We had to dress with ties and carry a briefcase. At 18, I was 18, 19, 20 years old. And one of the very first place I picked out of the phone book when I graduated. Out of my class, there was 30 people in my class when we started. 18 months later, I was one of 6 people left that graduated. It was a hardcore, intensive school. And I picked a name out of the phone book, Stein, Sapek, and Ames Architects in Waterbury, Connecticut. And I called them up, and they invited me in. And I got hired, very first place, because the school did have a good reputation. At 20 years old, I was the youngest draftsman. I was working with architects that had graduated out of Yale, Harvard, Syracuse. It was a prestigious architecture firm, and I didn't realize how good I was doing at 20 years old. Now, here's the thing. My friends went to 4 years colleges like Syracuse, and they were still partying back then. I felt like I was missing out on something. I was 20 years old, 21 years old, and I had gone through this intensive school, and I was doing good. I was renting a house, a three-bedroom house, and I had a girlfriend. I was looking at getting married. And I had a good professional job, all at 21 years old. And I screwed it all up. And a lot of it had to do with me feeling like I was missing out on partying. It was a big mistake. My friends were all at 4-year colleges, and they were juniors, probably juniors in college, and I'd see them going to frat parties, and, I'd go visit them and everything. And all the craziness and all the good times they were having in their, 19, 20, 21. And here I was in a professional, I felt like, looking back, I see how lucky I was, just like Devondre Sweet. He's all set to make it into the NFL, to have his life set for him. But yet you have this lure, I wouldn't call it peer pressure, but you're still young and you still have that, you want to socialize, and your friends still have a big influence on you at that age. And I would go out drinking every night. I'd come in hungover. I was probably I had guys working under me that I would delegate work to, 21 years old, wearing my tie, my briefcase. And I had new draftsmen that I would delegate the work to. So I was working my way up in this architecture firm at only 21, 22 years old at this point. And I just started partying more because I felt like I was missing out on, these frat parties and, like the Animal House and stuff like that. Even though looking back, I know what I should have enjoyed it. I should have, pursued and take advantage of the talent that I had and the foot up that I got in the door at this prestigious architectural firm, just like Devondre Sweet. And I remember them taking me into the office, the top architects, and they said, "Daryl, we're worried about you. You might have a drinking problem. You're coming in, hungover. We're worried about you." And I just kind of brushed it off, like I could handle it, and I kept doing what I was doing. And I ended up getting laid off. They said it, they told me, because they didn't want to fire me. They really, I had a good relationship and I was doing good work. And I don't think looking back, they didn't want to fire me, but they had to eventually lay me off, and I lost that job. And I kept drinking, and I kept using more at 22 years old, and I ended up getting a job driving a truck. Well, actually, I ended up getting a job just in a warehouse, a magazine distribution warehouse, and making like half the money. And you know, that changed my life right there. That whole the way that I handled that job, you know, just kind of like Devondre Sweet. I think, you know, there's so much pressure on you at that age. There's the pressure of wanting to socialize and have a girlfriend and all that, and the pressure of getting a job and forming an idea, forming a path for your life. And the two conflict, you know, the partying and the you know, trying to form a professional, a good life for yourself. You know, things ended up working all right for me, you know, but after 2 decades of hard drug use and getting fired from multiple jobs, and, you know, I eventually became a Teamster truck driver, you know, so I got fired from the architecture job. I ended up working in a warehouse, and I did good in the warehouse, even though I was still drinking and everything, and they made me a driver. And they had me get my CDL, and I worked my way up driving. But all through my careers, all through my work life, I kept making the mistake of drinking and using and screwing up my life over and over again. Looking back, you know, I threw away what could have been a good professional life. I probably would have eventually gotten my architecture license. That was my goal back then. You know, I mean, I'm happy now, and I think things they worked out, but not without 20 years of hard drug use and a lot of misery. So to Devondre Sweet, I hope he does well. I hope he can still have a good future in the NFL, though I'm seriously doubtful, because these guys are going to invest millions of dollars in him. Just like these architecture companies were going to invest a lot of time and money into me, kind of grooming me for being a project manager. That's where I was headed. And eventually they had to cut their losses and lay me off, you know, and it changed. I lost my girlfriend. I lost the house that I was renting. I totaled my car, you know, and I ended up with nothing. You know, after a couple decades, I ended up getting back to where I should be, but I made some mistakes that I really didn't have to make, just like Devondre Sweet probably did. All right, I'll be back later. Recovery is possible. I've been clean and sober since October 23rd of 2006. I'll say it again. Recovery is possible. I was a hardcore heroin and crack addict every single day for 2 decades, and I am now clean and sober. Recovery is possible. I'll be back later with another video.